I am on a mission, and that is to save all the TS10s. There's a few things that go wrong with these TS10s, and I just want to talk about that really quickly. These knobs and pots can be destroyed. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. They're just plastic. They rock back and forth, side to side. Bad, bad, bad. The LED can go bad. Again, remember, these came out in 1986. It's been a minute. The switch inside, these are just standard keyboard switches. They do go bad. They get dirty. These things are stomped on. Those go bad. The as you can tell here, this is again 100% original. This is my personal TS10. This little battery clip dry rots out, and it can be very bad if you have a battery and it touches the enclosure. Very bad, bad, bad. Inside, we have jacks. These plastic jacks have some forces. They're not screwed down. Even though they have threads, they are not tied into the chassis at all. So all the force of being plugged and unplugged is on these pads here. And that creates stress fractures on the pads. So that solder will actually create a gap, and I fixed this one because that was one of the issues on this one. So there's stress fractures on those solder pads. I talked a little bit about the controls. Those can go bad. And really, I think that's it. It's really mechanical things that can go wrong with these. I want to talk a little bit about this specific pedal. This is my Instagram friend Matt's pedal. He reached out to me. He says, "Hey Ryan, I have a TS10 and it stopped working. I don't use it anymore. I've had a technician look at it. I think it's a grounding issue, but do you mind taking a look?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. I got nothing else going on. Why not?" And that's a lie, by the way. I have too much going on. But this was really interesting to me, and that's what I take on more or less nowadays, is things that just are interesting to me. So I started to take apart this pedal, and the control board here, you can see, is missing a pot, and that's because I desoldered it. But really what happened was, at some point in this TS10's life, I think, here's my original again, it must have been dropped like this right on that knob, or some sort of thing happened, because this plastic shaft must have got pushed down hard. And then see that little wafer on the bottom, that little light brown wafer? That actually has the resistant element on it. And then this is pretty much what I did when I started disassembling the control board, is that it all just shattered and came apart, and then I desoldered the rest from there. Not good. My challenge then became, okay, let's find a replacement. Well, guess what? They do not make replacements. And then here's a 9mm pot that's somewhat close, and I could have made it work. The issue then becomes, do they have this drive value, which is a logarithmic 500K pot and a D shaft? You see how this design is like a D? It's that way or this way? Like a D, so it could fit the original knobs. And womp womp, as my 11-year-old daughter would say, and they do not make them. So what am I going to do? Well, I think I had some skills to make my own board. Here it is. Here is the replacement. Here's what I come up with. It is a control board to fix this pedal that I had to design. It accepts both 9mm pots. You can see here it snaps into place, or snap pots, as well as 16mm, which are what I used here. And what I had to do, well, I looked then for knobs that kind of look like TS10 knobs. And those kind of look close. And you can see over here a finished, well, it's sort of finished, it's nothing inside, a finished unit with them installed. So I was like, all right, cool. Those aren't accept gnarled shafts. Long story short, that's what I went with. Gnarled shaft, 16 millimeter pots. A big advantage of these 16 millimeter pots, well, actually, the 9 millimeters too, if they're metal shafts, is remember how I was saying how that button must have got a lot of brute force or something must have pushed down on it really hard? Well, if you look here, the design of these pots kind of prohibit you from pushing down. You see how it's kind of flared out, and I can't really push down to destroy it in that way, at least easily. So I think these are going to be overall a better fit for that sort of thing. They do not. I do not recommend you. If you do, I'm not going to make these available just yet. I want to actually design a full daughter board for it. But I wanted to make sure the design accommodated both those pot styles. So in the future, when someone's building it, they have some options. And I think it's just really cool to have options, especially for builders. Everyone kind of has their preference of 9 millimeter or 16 millimeter, and now it doesn't even matter. But you'll notice that when I put this pot in, it does not touch any other metal components, because normally with these sort of designs, especially if you have all through-hole components, you kind of have to find or add a plastic dust cap on the back. But the only issue with that and this specific board in this control cavity is it's just not enough space. So you have to minimize the amount of space. And one way to do that is just to do that. And also, once you kind of tighten everything down, this will lift up. So there's actually an air gap in there once you connect it to the top of the enclosure. Another thing I learned is these control boards, this pedal again came in really noisy, and it wasn't just because of that drive pot. It was because it was missing a few screws. One of those screws is this one right here, this pad. See that pad looks different than the others? This pad is responsible for grounding the enclosure. So if there was any radio frequency interruptions or just anything sort of interference going, it would just traverse right through this enclosure and make noise within the circuit. So that was another thing that I discovered was kind of contributing to the noisy factor. Keeping in line with that mythology and the design principles, you're going to notice it's on the bottom, so I have to kind of flip it to this is how it would be installed. But that where the screw kind of lands is grounded as well. So now we can have like sort of the original style grounding all at a single point. So this is the only point that enclosure is grounded. That's often, I guess, overlooked when this technician put it back together. I talked a little bit about the LEDs going bad, so I just installed a new LED in Matt's unit here. So I kind of flip this over, talk about that. So I installed a brand new LED. I transferred the original 11 millimeter standoff for that LED in here. I transferred over the TC9, which is a 220 nanofarad tantalum capacitor. Here's R15, which is a 220 ohm resistor. I transferred over. It's interesting that Ibanez calls the tone pot metallics. I thought that was kind of interesting when I was designing this. I didn't realize that before. But yeah, so this is cool. I'm really happy with how this comes out. You see when you tighten it up, it actually creates an air gap. So that's super good for that pedal. And another benefit of the design that I went with, or the construction of the circuit board, is they're actually 2-layer, whereas the original front and back of these, well, actually the main board here, you can see that there's only solder runs and everything on one layer. So these components don't have what's called like through-hole plated sort of mechanical rigidity. But with my board, and then just basically modern construction in general, they're 2-layer. So right through, you can kind of see it's shiny in all of the holes. So when I soldered in this ribbon cable again, and I made sure that there was no cracks in the original, thanks for asking, is it's going to make a better mechanical connection. It just moves the weak spot specifically on that. But for resistors and capacitors, it moves them up. Same with these controls. They're soldered on the top and on the bottom, or the bottom and the top, depending on how you look at it. So yeah, so fully assembled, and it was fixed. And this is what it looks like, minus the LED with those new knobs on it. So thank you, Matt, for giving me the opportunity to fix your pedal. It gave me inspiration to kind of go and do a thing that I've been wanting to do for a while, which was design a replacement board here on the TS10 to fit in the original TS10. Now, a sneak preview of kind of where my head is at. Here's my VS10, and what's been wildly popular is these switches for bass and clipping options. When I was looking at my pedal, and because Analog Man is doing rehousing of TS10s, these enclosures are starting to come up. I bought this for $75. So if anyone has a TS10 enclosure for around $75, please let me know. I would love to make it new. And I was looking, I'm like, wait a minute, what's that hole? So open up the top here. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's cool. I don't really need that hole for anything. There's no real purpose for it. I was like, I wonder. And then I have two switches here. Okay, you guys can make all the finding the hole jokes that you want. Put that in here, flipped it around. I was like, oh, heck yeah. I can actually have those mod switches inside. I don't have to do any dumb trim pots or anything. Lift up the foot switch, make that mod, close it, or give it a tone test right away without having to unplug and stuff like that and get different impressions. So when I redesign or make my own design for the VS10 or the main board here, I'm going to incorporate those switches in that design. And if you notice, I'm a purist. I want to know when something is stock or modified. So that's, I think, contributing to the popularity of these switches, because you know right away if you're in the stock TS10 mode or if you're going into a mod territory. So that's where my head's at. I'll probably design it over the winter because I got, again, a lot of other things going on right now. I kind of owe a few people some things. But this is very exciting. This is way too exciting. I needed to do it. It's been a while. I wanted to save this TS10. Hopefully, John Mayer, if you see it, I know that you have issues with your TS10s. Let me help you with that. It's my plea. I want to hear all that good stuff as intended. Well, anyway, hope you guys enjoyed. You can do all the YouTube things, like, subscribe, hit that bell. If you want to buy something, I got a bunch of other circuit boards that I do for you do-it-yourself folks. That's thetonegeek.com. Again, I'm Ryan. I hope you guys have a good evening, day, morning, night, whatever it is there. So long.